started. But of course.
Nice. Well, if you want, I can just I can get us started here. We wait maybe a minute, see if Rachel shows up. Oh, Emmy's coming and going. Oh, that would be bad. Although her last pose there looked like it, didn't it? Looked like Han Solo. Oh, of course I got it. I live for Star Wars. December can't come soon enough. Welcome back.
I have no idea how long this is going to work. It makes me sad. Maybe if I don't run video, I'll try doing that.
Sure.
Okay. Just going to stare at Peter's beautiful face.
Okay. Well, I think with the three of us, we might be able to get this started, and I can try and kind of ad-lib a little bit until Rachel gets here, because I know she's going to have things to say, because she has things to say about the Bible.
True.
And she knows it really well, too, which always impresses me. Yeah, Genesis 4, looking over it, I think the obvious place to start is Cain and Abel, which is its own kind of standalone story. But I think there's also a pretty big thing going on here, starting in verse 17, which connects itself back to Cain and Abel. I mean, it has a jump-off point in 17 with the lineage of Cain, but it kind of seems to come to some sort of climax or something when Lamech kills somebody, and the vengeance against him is increased 77-fold from Cain's, and so I think that's been noted by a lot of folks to discuss the multiplication of killing and evil in the world. But I don't know, maybe we can find something else going on here and kind of illuminate it a little bit more. So did you guys have any thoughts on this passage overall, either the Cain story, the Lamech section, or both together, or even that lineage there from 17 to 22, where they're just talking about how different things got introduced into creation? What verse is that, Jeff? I've acquired a man from the Lord. Oh, interesting.
Ah.
Produced a man. Yeah, so the NRSV has, I produced a man with the help of the Lord. But that's a little different, isn't it? I mean, what does that mean if somebody's acquiring? Is Eve going to the slave market to buy people? And if so, where did they come from? Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Emmy, did you have any thoughts? Not just on acquiring people or acquiring people. Hmm. We may have lost her. So, no, we just got Emmy's laugh, and that was about it. That was exciting. Excuse me. Yeah, so, after acquiring Cain, then she has a child, right, which is Abel. So Cain's the older one. But, I mean, Jeff, that's pretty interesting, that he would acquire instead of produce. So are Cain and Abel even brothers? I mean, if this is an acquisition, like what's going on here? So we've said that they're brothers, but it isn't till verse 10 where he says, am I my brother's keeper? So that's the first time he mentions brotherhood between the two. And and then do things even change if they're not brothers? Like, does the ethical thrust of the story become any different? Assuming there is an ethical thrust. Yeah. So I'm trying to look up the Hebrew here for that word. Oh yeah. So the Hebrew word kana is what's used for Cain, which can mean acquire or procure, could even be subjugate. Hmm. 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 Yeah. So, right. Yeah. I think, and I think we wouldn't want to lose the fact that when we're talking about merchant language with people, we're also talking about slave language. So, I mean, immediately, we could talk about merchants, but what type of merchants, right? So if they're dealing in human beings, what type of merchants are they? You know? I mean, and that also it frames Cain's uh, or Cain's killing of Abel in a completely different light, if that's the case too. definitely. No, I stand corrected on the brother thing. Verse 2, it says, she bore his brother Abel. Yeah, yeah. So the farmer, or is even a farm hand. Well, yeah. So I mean, we could talk about this. Emmy's just asking about the shepherd versus farmer rivalry, um, and there's probably a number of ways to look at it. So a lot of it, I think, in part depends on who's writing the text and when it's written. So if it's written before exile, then we may be talking about a period of time where you have a monarchy ruling out of Jerusalem, who and like a kind of a centralized authority, and then in the kingdom you might have other plots of land or plantations, and those plantations would have one wealthy family surrounded by farms, maybe subsistence farmers, slave hands, things like that would help them run the farm. And so you have very, very few wealthy and a massive amount of poor. So in terms of how farming works, there are, and this is where it's Cain as farm hand, maybe not as farmer. And I know this is probably getting away from what you were asking, Emmy, but if we do think about Cain as farm hand, then he's perhaps somebody who is only making a subsistence living. Whereas if he tills the land, as a farmer, as a landowner, plantation owner, that's a different issue, right? Now, in terms of shepherds, now I think we think about shepherds oftentimes as Christians in the New Testament sense as the poor, smelly ones, which might be the case, but they're living in kind of a different situation, where they kind of go where their herd leads, where sheep like to graze, where there's grazing land, and those two things don't necessarily mix. So I think there's a lot of different dynamics going on here. There's the rich versus poor, potentially. There's who gets what land and what land is arable, what things do sheep eat. And then also you have the centralized authority who gets to benefit from all of this. So they have the army and they can make money off of it. Now, with that said, if this is written post-exile, so when people are returning, and we're assuming that the people who were educated are the ones returning from Babylon, then they're the ones who have the ability to write. They're also probably coming with knowledge of farming and with an experience living in a farmer, an agriculturally dominated area, which is on the Tigris and Euphrates, and then they come back probably with some sort of culture clash, assuming that there are still shepherds in Judea when they arrive back. So it could also be kind of a culture clash sort of language. So the newcomers in the occupying sort of the Cain situation and the people who were there who have the Abel situation. Yeah, Jeff. So shepherds might wander with the flocks. And farmers are tied to the land, but once you're tied to the land, then you have territory, and that makes for an interesting conflict, for sure. And I think especially if we're talking about the entrance of violence into the world, then territory is a huge issue. But I think as we read further, we'll see that offering seems to be what's at issue, at least for God. So I think since I'm the one with the reliable connection and the voice, the mic working, I'll read up to verse 7 here. Maybe we can go a little bit further than that. So starting 4, verse 1. Now the man knew his wife, Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have produced, or acquired, as we said, a man with the help of the Lord. Next she bore his brother, Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a tiller of the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground. And Abel, for his part, brought of the firstlings of his flock, their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering. Actually, I just want to say we have that Abel brought him his fat portions, which is kind of cute. Anyway, verse 5. So, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. The Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry, and why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is lurking at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must master it. All right, so there's a lot going on there. One thing that comes to mind when I'm looking at this is what different people seem to desire. So Cain and Abel both seem to desire to give an offering, and God has a desire for certain other offerings, or certain of the offerings, right? But people are also getting angry here, you know. So if your desire is not met, do you get angry? Does God want something because it's more valuable than the other? Does God want Abel's just because God likes the fatty portions? I mean, there's a lot of questions here about desire of each character. What do you guys think? Abel gave his best, and Cain gave only the bare minimum. But what if? So let's say though, if we look back at at verse 2. Okay, so we have Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain was a tiller of the ground. So I mean, that's what these people are. So is not Cain's best also on display here if he's giving what he is, who he is? I mean, we're told that their identities, beyond one being purchased and the other one being a brother and both being sons, are tied to their professions in relationship to animals and the earth. So is it fair to say that Cain gives the bare minimum and Abel gives the best? So Jeff here says, all Cain is doing is what God already gave man as penalty for being driven out of Eden. There is no extra effort. Interesting. So now God did give animals quite early on in the creation, both creation accounts, as something. So I think it was the second one where they're given early on as a gift for man. So potentially Abel's actually giving the earliest gift. Cain is. It seemed to me that Cain is working with new technology here, unless that's the problem. So I think, yeah, I mean that might be another issue here. And I guess where I'm pushing is probably where I like to push generally is, we're going to go into this assuming that Cain is bad and Abel's victimized, but is that necessarily the truth? I mean, it seems right out of the gate that if we want to go with Cain has purchased, then he's already sort of victimized, and both of them are really thrust into these roles where they're, we don't get much of where they want to go with their lives. They're not given a whole lot of extra string from the narrator. In addition to that, though, so let's, I mean, even if we do say that one is giving more effort, or maybe because we're saying that, verse 7 is interesting. If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is lurking at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must master it. So, Jeff, I'm not certain if you're Lutheran or not. I know a lot of those of us who have been hanging out here are. Oh, Rachel.
Hello?
Hi.
Am I here?
You are here for reals.
Okay. I'm so sorry. We had some issues here. There's a choir practicing, and I had to. Anyway, I'm here now. I'm gonna grab my Bible in my commentary.
Great. We're talking about Genesis 4.
Okay, I'm at my office. Let me grab that.
Okay. So we could talk about this when Rachel gets back here too. Oh, she's right there. You're right here. You're in your office.
I'm here.
So we're talking Genesis 4, right? And we have been discussing quite a bit. So Jeff pointed out
You're frozen
pretty
for like
early on.
30 seconds.
Ah! So were you.
Okay.
We were both frozen.
Okay.
We were frozen together.
Let it go. Let it go.
So Jeff pointed out, we started reading, it was 4:1, that his King James version says that Eve was saying, after she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have acquired a man with the help of the Lord. My NRSV has produced. I don't know what.
Well, in the Hebrew, it's hana, which is acquired.
Right.
Yeah, because in Spanish it's adquirir, which is to acquire.
Oh, interesting. So they're related, or maybe coincidence?
Yeah, well, usually, in my experience, like the Spanish translations tend to be closer to the Hebrew and Greek.
Interesting.
I don't know why. Maybe it's because it's a Romance language and it lends itself to like similar vocabulary. But yeah, it says acquire.
Yeah. So we were talking about, and Jeff also raised the issue of Jesus.
Who is Jeff and where is he?
Oh, Jeff is the purplish icon, and he's chatting on the side. So if you go to the left-hand side, there's like a blue speech bubble chat thing. You click on that, you can see what he's saying. And Emmy keeps dropping in and out.
I pushed the mute button, or the speaker button. Oh no, that's not what I want to do. Ah! Okay, never mind, I'm just going to stop. Oh, wait, now I see this.
Yeah, you good?
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Cool.
I do my best. Okay, yeah. Now I'm trying to see this chat. Okay, got it.
So anyway, so we were talking about purchasing language and what it means. So the question of if Cain is, if he's a purchased man, does that make him a slave? Something like that. And we also were talking about agrarian metaphors like tilling the land and sheep and shepherds and grazing and territory. So whether or not this is an introduction of territory and things like that into the world.